I don't know your name yet, and I don't know where you are in the world right now, but I know you exist, and that thought alone has followed me through some of the loneliest nights of my life. Nights where the noise of ambition was louder than comfort, and the weight of responsibility pressed harder than sleep ever could. So I'm writing this not as the man the world sees on screens or headlines, but as the man who has failed more times than he's admitted, the man who has stared at ceilings, wondering whether the price of chasing impossible dreams was too high. And if you're reading this one day, I want you to know that everything I've built, every risk I've taken, every sacrifice I've made, was never about money or recognition. It was about proving something to myself first, that I could endure pain without becoming small, that I could carry pressure without breaking my values, and that I could stand alone without losing my ability to love deeply, because long before you enter my life, I need to be worthy of you, not by success, but by character. And I want you to understand that the road I chose was never smooth. It was uncertain, isolating, and often unforgiving. And there were moments when I questioned whether building the future was worth losing pieces of the present. Moments when relationships failed, not because love was absent, but because timing was cruel and ambition is a demanding master. And if I'm being honest, I learned the hard way that dreams don't wait for comfort. They demand commitment, even when the cost is misunderstood. And if you ever wonder why I work the way I do, why my mind seems restless even in quiet rooms, it's because I've always believed that life is too short to live small when we have the chance to do something meaningful. And yet, despite all that drive, all that obsession with progress, there were nights when I wished someone understood the silence behind my determination, someone who could sit with me without asking me to slow down or explain myself, someone who wouldn't compete with my mission but stand beside it. And maybe that someone is you. And if it is, I want you to know that I never wanted perfection. I wanted honesty. I wanted someone who understands that growth is messy, that greatness comes with doubt, and that strength isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward anyway. And before you become my wife, before titles and promises, I need you to know that I am not a finished product. I am still learning how to balance vision with presence, work with love, solitude with connection, and I promise you this, not that life with me will be easy, but that it will be real, that I will never stop striving to be better, not just as a builder of companies or ideas, but as a man who listens, who respects, who chooses partnership over ego, because success without someone to share the quiet moments with is empty. And if one day you hold my hand and wonder whether the sacrifices were worth it, I want why. But to remember this letter, remember that every long night, every difficult decision, every moment of distance was never about running away from love, but about building a future strong enough to protect it. If you're still listening to me now, then I owe you a deeper truth, one that doesn't show up in interviews or achievements. Because behind every visible win, there were invisible losses, and behind every confident decision, there was uncertainty I carried alone. And I want you to know this, because loving me will mean understanding that I didn't become strong by avoiding pain. I became strong by surviving it, by letting failure teach me instead of define me. And there were times when things collapsed so completely that rebuilding felt almost impossible, times when companies were on the edge of death, when people doubted not just my ideas but my sanity, when headlines predicted the end, and friends quietly disappeared. And in those moments I learned something that shaped me forever, that when everything external falls apart, the only thing that keeps you standing is your internal compass, the voice that reminds you why you started when quitting would be easier. And I won't lie to you, there were nights when I questioned myself deeply, nights when exhaustion blurred my confidence and the loneliness felt heavier than the workload, because ambition can be isolating when few people understand why you refuse to settle for ordinary. And I lost people along the way, not always because of conflict, but because paths diverged, priorities shifted, and I was too focused on the horizon to notice who was falling behind me. And if you ever wonder why I value resilience so much, it's because I've seen how fragile comfort really is, how quickly stability disappears, and how important it is to build yourself into someone who can stand even when the ground shakes. And I want you to understand that my relationship with failure is different than most. I don't see it as humiliation. I see it as information, as data that refines judgment, strengthens resolve, and strips away illusions. And yet, that mindset came with emotional cost, because constantly pushing forward leaves little room to process pain in the moment. So it accumulates quietly, layer by layer, until you realize you've been carrying more than you admit. And there were times when I shut down emotionally, not because I didn't care, but because caring while under relentless pressure felt overwhelming. And if I ever seem distant, I want you to remember this. It's not absence of feeling, it's the weight of responsibility pressing inward. And I'm telling you this now because I don't want our future to be built on misunderstandings. I don't want you to mistake silence for lack of love, or intensity for lack of tenderness, because the same force that drives me to work relentlessly is the force that makes me loyal, protective, and deeply committed once I choose someone. And I've learned through hard lessons that success without emotional maturity is hollow, that achievement doesn't compensate for connection, and that no amount of innovation can replace the need to be understood. And if you're going to be my wife, I want you to know that I'm still learning how to open doors I once closed to survive, still learning how to slow my mind enough to be present, still learning that strength doesn't mean carrying everything alone. And there will be moments when life tests us, when pressure rises and doubts creep in. But what I've learned from every collapse is this: nothing meaningful is built without endurance, nothing lasting comes without patience, and nothing powerful exists without vulnerability at its core. And I don't expect you to save me or fix me. I only hope you walk beside me as I continue evolving, because the man I am today was forged by struggle, but the man I want to become will be shaped by partnership, by trust, by someone who understands that pain doesn't disqualify you from love. It prepares you to value it more deeply. And if one day I look at you and seem quieter than usual, remember that silence is where I've always rebuilt myself, where I turn chaos into clarity. And I promise you that every lesson failure taught me will show up in how I protect our future, how I fight for what matters, and how I never take you for granted, because when you've lost enough, you learn to recognize what's irreplaceable. If I'm honest with you in the way I've learned honesty matters most, then I need to talk about love, not as a fantasy, but as a decision, because everything meaningful in my life has come from choosing long-term purpose over short-term comfort. And love, real love, is no different. It isn't built on constant excitement or perfect alignment. It's built on commitment during moments when the world pulls in opposite directions. And I want you to understand that choosing you will not be an escape from my work or my mission. It will be an expansion of it, because the right partnership doesn't compete with vision. It strengthens it, grounds it, and reminds you why the future is worth building at all. And I've learned through experience that love fails not because people don't care, but because they stop choosing each other when life becomes demanding, when ambition demands time, when pressure steals patience, and when silence replaces conversation. And I don't want that for us, which is why I'm saying this now. Before vows, before promises, before expectations, being with me will require strength, but not the kind that hardens you, the kind that softens you without making you weak, the kind that understands that sacrifice isn't lost when it's shared. And there will be moments when my attention is divided, when my mind is elsewhere, when the future feels closer to me than the present. And in those moments, I want you to know that love doesn't disappear just because it isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet, patient, waiting for space to breathe. And I've learned that the most powerful form of love is loyalty to growth, supporting someone not for who they are in a single moment, but for who they're becoming over time. And if I ever struggle to express myself emotionally, remember that expression takes many forms. Sometimes it's words, sometimes it's effort, sometimes it's protection, and sometimes it's the refusal to give up, even when things feel heavy. And I promise you this: not perfection, but intention; not ease, but endurance. Because love that lasts is built the same way great things are built, through iteration, honesty, failure, correction, and relentless commitment. And I will choose you not because it's convenient, but because it's meaningful. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. And I want us to build something that doesn't crumble under stress, something that understands that partnership is not about balance in every moment, but trust over time, knowing that when one carries more, the other stands strong, and when both are tired, they rest together without resentment. And I want you to know that my idea of love is not possession. It's respect, it's freedom, it's two independent minds choosing alignment without losing themselves. Because I don't want someone who needs me. I want someone who wants me, someone who could stand alone but chooses to stand with me. And if one day the world judges us, misunderstands us, or pressures us from the outside, I want us to be unshaken inside, because the strongest relationships are NOT, built on public approval but private understanding. And I'm telling you this because I don't believe in fairy tales. I believe in resilience, in patience, in shared purpose, choosing each other even when life is loud and demanding. And if you ever question whether love can survive ambition, remember this: ambition without love is empty, but love without purpose fades. And together, when aligned, they create something enduring, something that doesn't just feel good in the moment, but stands strong across years, across storms, across change. And when I imagine a future with you, it isn't about slowing down or settling. It's about building faster and better, because I'm no longer building alone. It's about coming home not to silence, but to understanding, not to pressure, but to peace. And that, more than any achievement, is the kind of success I want to share with you. As I look further ahead than most people are comfortable looking, beyond quarterly wins and short-term praise, I think about legacy not as something written in history books, but as something lived quietly in the lives we touch. And if you are to be my wife, then you are not just choosing a man, you are choosing a responsibility we will share together, the responsibility of how our decisions echo beyond us, into family, into future generations, into a world that will be shaped, whether we act intentionally or not. And I want you to know that my obsession with the future has never been about escaping the present. It has been about protecting it, about making sure that tomorrow is worth waking up to, that progress serves humanity rather than replaces it, and that our children, if we are blessed with them, inherit not just opportunity, but values. And I think often about what kind of father I want to be. Not perfect, not always present in every moment, but honest, accountable, and deeply invested in teaching resilience, curiosity, and courage, because the world they will grow up in will be faster, harsher, and more demanding than the one we knew. And I want them to learn early that comfort is not the goal, meaning is, and that love is not fragile when it is rooted in respect and truth. And I want you to know that family to me is not a distraction from purpose. It is the reason purpose matters at all, because building the future without grounding it in human connection risks creating something hollow, something impressive but empty. And if there are moments when my work pulls me away physically or mentally, I want you to remember that the same discipline that drives me outward is what will pull me back inward to protect what matters most. And I promise you that no vision, no company, no mission will ever matter more to me than the integrity of our home, because success that costs you your family is failure in disguise. And I've learned that lesson not from theory, but from watching what breaks when priorities are misaligned. And if one day we disagree about choices, about risks, about direction, I want those conversations to be rooted in respect, not power, because partnership is not hierarchy, it's collaboration. And I don't want you to follow me blindly. I want you to challenge me when I'm wrong, ground me when I drift too far ahead, and remind me of the human consequences behind abstract goals. And I want us to raise a family culture, whether large or small, built on curiosity instead of fear, on effort instead of entitlement, and on accountability instead of excuses, because the greatest inheritance we can leave behind is not wealth, but mindset, not status, but strength of character. And I want you to know that legacy isn't about being remembered by strangers. It's about being missed by the people who mattered. And when the noise fades, when the world moves on to the next headline, I want what remains to be a family that feels safe, honest, and deeply connected. And if there are moments when the weight of responsibility feels heavy on both of us, when the future feels uncertain, remember that we are not carrying it alone. We are carrying it together, and that shared weight becomes lighter, not because it disappears, but because trust distributes it. And I don't want a future built only on ambition. I want one built on wisdom, patience, and shared values, because progress without ethics is dangerous, and love without direction drifts. And together, aligned, we can build something that doesn't just move fast, but moves right. Something that balances as boldness with care, innovation with humanity, and vision with responsibility. And when I think about the life I want to live with you, It's not just about where we go or what we build, it's about who we become along the way. Because the future is not something we arrive at, it's something we create every day through the choices we make together. If you've stayed with me all the way here, then this is where everything I've said finally comes together, not as an idea or a vision, but as a promise. Because no matter how far I look into the future, no matter how ambitious the goals, or how uncertain the path, what ultimately gives meaning to everything is who you choose to walk beside you. And I want you to know that choosing you will be the most intentional decision of my life, not driven by impulse, admiration, or convenience, but by clarity, by the understanding that love is not something you find when life is calm, it's something you build when life is demanding. And I won't promise you a life free of struggle, because struggle is the price of doing something meaningful. But I promise you that you will never face it alone. That even when my mind is occupied and my world is loud, my loyalty will be quiet, steady, and unshakable. And if there are days when I seem distant, remember that distance is not absence. It's often preparation. It's me carrying weight so it doesn't fall on us both. And I promise you that I will always come back, not just physically, but emotionally, because home is not a place, it's a person. And I want that person to be you. And I want you to know that I don't expect you to be perfect, strong all the time, or endlessly understanding. I expect you to be human, to have doubts, to need reassurance, to ask questions. And I promise to meet you there with honesty instead of defense, with listening instead of ego, because the greatest strength I've learned is not dominance, it's humility, the willingness to admit when you're wrong, and the courage to grow from it. And if one day we stand together and look back at everything we've been through, the long nights, the sacrifices, the risks, the moments of fear and faith, I want us to see not what we endured, but what we built through it, a partnership rooted in trust, resilience, and shared purpose. And I want our love to be the kind that doesn't need constant validation from the outside world, the kind that survives silence, pressure, distance, and time. Because real love isn't loud, it's consistent. And when the world changes, when roles shift, when success fades, and new challenges rise, I want us to remain aligned, not because we stayed the same, but because we grew together. And if we have children, I want them to see love modeled not as perfection, but as effort, accountability, and respect, to see two people who chose each other every day, even when it was difficult, even when it required patience and sacrifice. And if we don't, I still want our lives to reflect the same truth, that love is not measured by what it produces, but by how it shows up, how it supports, how it endures. And this letter is not a conclusion, it's an invitation to build a life that balances ambition with intimacy, progress with presence, and vision with values. And when I imagine the end of my life, it's not the achievements or the recognition that matter most. It's the knowledge that I shared the journey with someone who understood me, challenged me, believed in me, and stood beside me, not because it was easy, but because it was meaningful. And if you are reading this one day as my wife, then know this with absolute certainty. Everything I built was just structure. You are the meaning inside it. And no matter how far the future stretches, my greatest hope is simple, that we continue choosing each other, not once, but always,